Good day, everybody. It's Andrew here. Welcome back to our channel. We've got some updates. Apparently, there was a deal that Democrats gave to Joe Manchin to get the stimulus package done, get stimulus checks for seniors done, and get even those monthly checks for families done as well. Everything was set to go down. They were on like the inch line to get this deal done, and then Joe Manchin completely blew it up. So let's discuss the details, what exactly this deal was, and what we expect to happen next. Could this deal potentially be revived? So with that said, we're going to cover all of that in this video. But before we jump into it, do me a quick favor, hit like, hit subscribe, and share this channel with anyone who you think might find this helpful. This is a community for seniors, and my job here is to be a voice for you, be a voice for seniors, and make sure President Biden keeps his promise to increase Social Security, increase SSI and SSDI, and even approve a stimulus check for seniors in this next stimulus package. So my full-time job is to gather the news, do the research, and bring the news to you that affects seniors the most, whether that's Social Security benefit changes, things that could potentially be changing in the future, what's happening in politics, what's happening at with the economy, inflation, the stock market, the bond market, pretty much anything across the board that affects seniors the most. So thank you for being a part of our community, and if you really want to support my work, subscribe to my second channel and also become a member of this channel. If you want to do that, all you have to do is click on the link that's in the comments of this video, and then in the middle of the page there's going to be a little join button. Click that there, and that's going to allow you to become a member, support my work, and allow me to do this full time. So thank you so much. And with that said, guys, let's jump right into today's updates. As I said in the intro, we're going to discuss a deal that Democrats gave to Joe Manchin. This was actually just breaking news. Apparently, this was a couple of weeks ago before negotiations broke down, and now people are speculating that potentially this deal could be revived. But before we talk about that, let's do a quick update on daily trending news. There are a lot of headlines saying that grocery stores still have empty shelves amid supply chain disruptions, Omicron, and winter storms. So when you put all these things together, people are getting sick, people are calling off. I've seen this myself in my neighborhood. I go to my local Walgreens or grocery store, and like half the shelves are empty. There's like one employee in the entire store, and it's really tough on everybody, guys, and it's one of the things leading to higher prices. It's leading to shorter supply, which forces companies to raise prices. Then you go to the store and you have terrible service. It's just, you also feel bad for the workers because the ones that are there have more stress because they're the only ones there. Let me know in the comments, guys, if you've been noticing this as well. Of course, inflation continues to get worse, and Democrats are saying that they're trying to tackle inflation, but at the same time approve more stimulus. So they're trying to thread that needle where they're giving people money to help deal with inflation, but then not causing more inflation as it is. And a lot of experts think that the best way to do that is to make sure you only give the stimulus to people who are slightly lower income. Like if you make less than 40 grand per year, above that, really, it kind of could cause inflation because then you're using the extra stimulus to buy things you really don't need. It kind of becomes like discretionary income, which could lead to inflation. Also trending in the news is the fact that Dr. Fauci just went at it with Senator Rand Paul and called him out for basically using Fauci as a scapegoat to try and raise money for his own campaigns. So I'm actually going to talk about that at the end of this video. And let me know, guys, do you like Dr. Fauci? I'm always curious to know because it seems like half of you like Fauci, half of you don't like him. He's a pretty polarizing figure. It seemed like at the beginning of the pandemic, most people liked him, but then kind of these campaigns came out making Fauci look bad. And yeah, that's really what that's going to be about at the end of this video. So stick around if you'd like to see that. But with that said, guys, let's talk about this deal that Democrats offered Joe Manchin to get the stimulus package done. Why that deal broke down. That was thought to be the deal that was going to get the package done. Why that broke down and why we think this could potentially be revived. So yeah, this article is titled Senate Democrats Offered Manchin a Huge Compromise on Checks to Parents. Then Manchin blew it up and they don't know why. So Senate Democrats thought that Manchin had ultimately dropped his demands for a work requirements on the Biden child tax credit. That's referring to the fact that he wants that monthly stimulus payment for kids, that monthly child tax credit, to have a requirement that parents actually have to work. Currently, you literally don't have to work for an hour a year and you still get that monthly credit. He wants to change that, which makes sense on its face, right? Because why are you getting basically a handout if you're not even working and you're not contributing to society? I always say on this channel, seniors pay taxes their entire life. People on SSI and ssdi worked for many years, pay taxes. It's not a handout. You're getting your tax money back. But in a situation where parents aren't working at all, I can see where Joe Manchin's coming from. But the problem that Democrats have with that is then the effects on poverty that it has actually becomes greatly diminished. And we've all seen that the monthly stimulus payments for kids cut childhood poverty almost in half. But if you take that away from people who don't work at all, you're actually taking it away from people who need it the most. And those effects on poverty lowering actually become very diminished. So that became an issue. And then at the very last minute, he said he's not going to do the deal. And Senate Democrats actually cut a deal with him, offering him a very strong compromise. So Democrats were basically trying to get Joe Manchin not to do that, right? They wanted Joe Manchin to say people that don't work could still get the monthly stimulus payments for families. And the compromise they offered Joe Manchin, the deal they offered him, was to cut the extension of these monthly payments from 3 years to only 1 year. So that was their major deal. That was the big compromise that they offered Joe Manchin. Like, hey, instead of doing this for 3 years, which originally was going to be 10 years, instead of doing this for 3 years, we're just going to do it for 1 year. And that was the big deal that they offered Joe Manchin. And that was the deal that they thought was actually going to get it done. They thought, hey, if we lower it to 1 year, we'll see how the program goes. If it goes well, we'll continue extending it. If it doesn't go well, then we can just cut it at the end of that year. Experts thought and Democrats thought that was truly going to be enough to get Joe Manchin on board. Unfortunately, Joe Manchin then exploded. He went off the rails. That was the next day, actually, when he went out and held those interviews saying that he was done. He wasn't doing the package anymore. He was completely fuming over the fact that something leaked about Joe Manchin saying that West Virginians would use the stimulus money on drugs, things like that. And he always supported the tax credit, but said he wanted it to still only go to families who have jobs. So that was really when negotiations broke down. So now experts are saying, can this deal be revived? Can they tell Joe Manchin, you know what? We're only going to do it for 1 year. And will that be enough to get Joe Manchin on board? And will that be enough to leave enough funding left over to still do the stimulus checks for seniors? Of course, guys, in this community and on this channel, our main priority is taking care of seniors, taking care of those who are disabled, and taking care of people who have paid taxes their entire lives and deserve the help more than anyone else, guys. I mean, when I see families getting monthly stimulus checks, and now we're talking about this deal really came down to those monthly stimulus checks for families. That was really what pushed Joe Manchin over the edge. So then it makes you think, like, all right, what if we had a scenario where we did just take it out completely, and then include the stimulus checks for seniors? Like, we already had a year of stimulus checks for families. Why not have a year of stimulus checks for seniors? Let me know in the comments if you guys agree with that. The problem Democrats have now is it's an election year, so this November, they're going to have seats up for election in both the House and the Senate. And the problem that happens is now that they gave these monthly stimulus checks for a year, if they take those away right before an election, that could potentially bode really, really bad for Democrats in these midterms. And they could lose control of both the House and the Senate, which would leave President Biden as a sitting duck, basically not getting anything done for his last 2 years. So, as it stands, honestly, Democrats are going to lose both chambers anyway, so they're really trying to find a way to do something extreme to try and win these elections. And for some reason, they're focusing on voting rights. Like, they think if they can change the rules, I'm not trying to downplay voting rights, right? It's obviously important, and people agree or disagree as to whether or not changes are needed. But they're trying to change the rules in a certain way that they think is going to benefit them. And of course, Republicans are trying to do the same thing for themselves. But at the end of the day, what they should be doing is helping the American people. Like, do what truly helps the American people, right? You see inflation going crazy. Colas were 5.9%. Well, now we have inflation at 7%. So basically, you're getting a negative cola of negative 1.1%, right? Because you got 5.9%, but then inflation was 7%. So really, your purchasing power from your benefits are 1.1% less. So you actually got a decrease in benefits based off of inflation, right? I mean, it's not quite that simple. It really depends what you buy and what's inflated and what's not. But overall, I mean, we can agree. COLA still wasn't enough. So we need the stimulus check for seniors. So guys, honestly, as far as this deal, to be honest with you, my opinion, and again, I've got my finger on the pulse of this stuff. Like, I've been doing stimulus updates for 2 years. we've been talking about politics, what's happening with the economy. You kind of get a sense for these things, right? You kind of, when you've got your finger on the pulse of these negotiations and what's going on with the economy, you get a good idea of what's realistic. And to be honest with you, this deal that they offered Joe Manchin, I don't think it's going to come back. As far as just lowering it to 1 year of monthly checks for families, what I think is going to ultimately happen is they're either going to have to completely take it out or they're going to have to lower the amount back to what it was before. I believe the tax credit was $2,000 before. So they could lower that to 2,000, give families like $150 per month. I mean, $150 per month per child is still great. If you have 3 kids, you're still getting $450 per month. I mean, that's way more than seniors have gotten. So I think that's realistic. And quite honestly, I think that's fair. I think families have gotten a lot of checks. They're going to get more checks during tax season for the back paid stimulus payments. And then you give them $150 a month per kid going forward. Joe Manchin's happy. Families are happy. Everyone's happy. Then we have more money left over for seniors to do those stimulus checks for seniors. And honestly, I mean, when you think about it, what they should be doing is using that extra leftover money for the monthly checks and giving it to seniors monthly. I mean, that was the original plan, right? $200 per month until the pandemic was over for a minimum of 2 years. So why can't we do that for seniors, guys? It makes absolutely no sense. But again, please subscribe. I'll keep you posted as things develop. This next stimulus package negotiations will continue. I truly think it's going to happen. Then we have Democrats talking about changing the filibuster rules. And again, if you missed my previous videos, if they change the filibuster rules, this would basically allow Democrats to do multiple small packages throughout the year and get a lot of legislation done. As opposed to just doing one massive budget reconciliation bill per year, they could do a bunch of small bills. So they could do things like more stimulus checks for seniors, and even Social Security changes, which we have been fighting for so long, guys. We've been fighting for Social Security benefits for like a year and a half at this point. I mean, quite honestly, it's getting ridiculous. Joe Biden at this point, all he's talking about is voting rights, when really, if you want seniors to vote, give them what you promised, right? Like, seniors, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure voting rights is important, but I mean, what's going to get your vote for Biden? Voting rights reform? Or, Social Security increases and SSDI increases, which President Biden promised? Let me know in the comments if you agree. But in any case, these filibuster changes really are not just for voting reform. It also could have an impact on stimulus and Social Security changes, because if they change the filibuster, this would allow Democrats to do multiple small packages. And again, it could pave the way. It wouldn't guarantee things, but it could pave the way to allow Democrats to do these things with a simple majority of 51 votes. See, currently, if Democrats want to increase Social Security benefits, they have to get 60 votes, which means it just ends up being filibustered. Now, if they could change the filibuster rule, they could reduce the qualifying amount for a vote on that to be 51, and that would allow them to do it without a single Republican vote, just like they've been doing these stimulus packages. Of course, they would still have to get Joe Manchin on board, and that would be the true test here, folks, because Joe Manchin has said multiple times he supports increasing benefits. So I would love to put him on the stand and see if he actually votes to do that, if Democrats brought that to a vote. So with that said, folks, don't forget to subscribe. We're going to have a ton of updates in the next couple of weeks regarding potentially having this deal revived for the stimulus package. The fact that Chuck Schumer is saying they're going to try and change the filibuster on January 17th to allow more legislation to get done more easily. So we're going to have a ton of updates for seniors. Don't forget to subscribe. And with that said, guys, I'm going to leave you with this clip from Dr. Fauci, discussing the fact that he thinks Republicans are attacking him, using him kind of as a scapegoat to try and just generate headlines, kind of stoke support from their base, basically demonizing Fauci to try and make themselves look better and get more donations for their campaigns. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is because obviously it's hard to do trending news without talking about the pandemic, and at the same time, this got really intense. I mean, Fauci has become a polarizing figure, but he says that all he does is give you guys the facts as best as he can. Then we have Republicans slamming him, saying that he's lying to the American people, and it's quite honestly like a soap opera, folks. So if you're not interested in this, I completely understand. It's nothing but drama, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting, so I thought I'd share it with you here at the end of the video. So with that said, folks, if you'd like to stick around, let me know your thoughts on this, whether or not you believe Fauci or whether you believe the Republicans on this issue. Let's take a look, see what he had to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you on the next video.
Yes or no, would you be willing to submit to Congress and the public a financial disclosure that includes your past and current investments? After all, your colleague, Dr. Walensky, and every member of Congress submits a financial disclosure that includes their investments.
I don't understand why you're asking me that question. My financial disclosure is public knowledge and has been so for the last 37 years or so, 35 years. It is totally accessible to you if you want it.
For the public, is it accessible to the public?
To the public.
Great, we look
You
forward to
are
reviewing it.
totally incorrect.
Well, we
Senator
look forward to
Marshall,
reviewing it.
Senator Marshall, Dr. Fauci has answered you. It is public information, and he's happy to give it to you if you would ask. Senator Moran.
What a moron. Jesus Christ.
Joining me now, the man who's been the receiving end of these attacks. He's been undeterred, Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and chief medical advisor to President Biden. Dr. Fauci, let's take a step back and talk about your career in public life and your career at the locus of these difficult policy issues having to do with deadly, high-stakes pandemics and epidemics and diseases. I was sort of amazed as we were going through the footage today to see your head on the spike outside a protest of NIH. I didn't know that it had sort of gotten to that point. Is this sort of how it goes, or is there something different now in the nature of our politics and the nature of the attacks on you that are different than what you've experienced before in public life?
It's entirely different, Chris. I mean, back in the activist days, the federal government was not early on including activists, particularly gay activists, those who were at risk for or who had already been living with HIV, in the kinds of discussions for clinical trials and the rigidity of the regulatory process. They made a really good point. They were fundamentally good people who were not lying. They were reacting. They were trying to gain attention. They were very theatrical about it. If you look at that film, most of those people, many of them now, are my closest friends. They are fundamentally people of high integrity who don't lie, who are trying to get the federal government to do things that, quite frankly, the federal government was slow in doing. And as the face of the federal government, the way they got attention, which was actually a pretty good activist ploy, it succeeded, was to be very iconoclastic, to be very provocative, and to be very theatrical. And that's what you saw in that clip. And they got my attention, and I sat down and listened to them because what they said made absolute sense, and we made major changes. They were dignified people. And like I said, many of them are my closest friends right now. What we're having now is outright lies that clearly are in the realm of politics. I mean, that thing I showed at the hearing is very, very true. We were having a hearing today, Chris, that was a tough hearing. There were tough questions that were asked on both sides of the aisle. I mean, the Democrats clearly, there was not a piece of cake. They were asking very good questions about what the administration was doing. And the Republicans themselves, led by Senator Burr, were asking questions that were important. And Mitt Romney and Susan Collins and Tuberville and others, including Senator Moran, were there asking tough questions. But what Senator Paul was doing was not even giving anyone a chance to make any explanation, nothing productive or constructive. It was totally ad hominem, literally from the get-go, before you could get a word out of your mouth. That's entirely different than the AIDS activists from the 1980s. It's fundamentally different.
You shared the story, and I had read reports about the individual who was arrested with weapons, saying that they're on their way towards you. Senator Paul, I think, gave an interview. He said, "Well, that's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with me. You can't hold people accountable for what some violent, disordered person is doing. It's irresponsible to paint with that brush." Have you experienced threats like this before, or a security situation like this before in your public life, given that you've had a career as long as you have?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. In all of the situations that we were in, it was trying to get attention to sit down and be able to talk. There was no threats. I went down to the AIDS activist hub in Greenwich Village, in the gay and lesbian community center, to talk about, and with the same people that were putting my head on a stake just to get my attention. And they got my attention, and I went and spoke to them. I felt completely safe in that environment because there were fundamental people who were struggling to get the attention of the government. What you saw at the hearing today was pure ad hominem. And I called him out because that's exactly what he's doing. He is raising money. Vote here, paid for by Rand Paul. Fire Fauci, he's killing you, he's murdering people, he's doing this. And by the way, donate here, click this box. I mean, if that isn't absolutely proof of what's going on here, I mean, you can't miss that one, Chris.
I want to play another moment today that happened with Senator Marshall, who seemed very focused on your public financial disclosures, which are required by law and filed. And there was an exchange over them where he seemed to think that they weren't accessible, and they are. You can get them here. Here was that exchange. Take a listen.
Yes or no, would you be willing to submit to Congress and the public a financial disclosure that includes your past and current investments? After all, your colleague, Dr. Walensky, and every member of Congress submits a financial disclosure that includes their investments.
I don't understand why you're asking me that question. My financial disclosure is public knowledge and has been so for the last 37 years or so, 35 years. It is totally accessible to you if you want it.
For the public, is it accessible to the public?
To the public.
Great, we look
Senator
forward to
You are
reviewing it.
totally incorrect.
Well, we
Senator
look forward to
Marshall,
reviewing it.
Senator Marshall, Dr. Fauci has answered you. It is public information, and he's happy to give it to you if you would ask. Senator Moran.
What a moron. Jesus Christ.
Did sound like you at the end there, Dr. Fauci. You seemed a little frustrated with that line of inquiry.
Well, Chris, it just as an example, again, he was implying, if you listen to the entire dialogue, that in my position, responsible for drug trials and having so-called inside knowledge of what drug works and drug doesn't work, that maybe I was making investments sort of like ahead of the game here. He was totally implying that. And he made the statement that we can't get your financial statement. It was stunning to me that a United States senator doesn't realize that my financial statement is public knowledge. It was just like, where have you been?